American Athletic Conference. It has some fantastic stadiums, but they've got to work on that name. It's a bit generic. Technically, every FBS conference is an American Athletic Conference. Anyway, who really cares? Here are the American Athletic Conference football stadiums. Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium, home of the East Carolina Pirates. It's known as the Rowdy Dowdy, but you'll probably know that if you've listened to this song by the famous rapper Douglas McNugget. You pull up in your Audi and say howdy, Rowdy Dowdy. You run into a Saudi, he's angry and he's shouting. He shows his belly button and you see that it's an Audi. Hey! Just terrible music. How on earth did that go platinum? Since half the viewers have now switched off, let's just get into the stadium. The exterior is fairly bare bones, although there are some nice hits of brickwork in places. On the inside it's a horseshoe design with an upper deck on just one side, nothing out of the ordinary. But I always like to see some splashes of colour. This time it's in the form of 10,000 or so purple chairback seats. Always a welcome addition in a stadium full of bench seating. Also, the Murphy Center at the open end is quite easy on the eye. Yulman Stadium, home of Tulane Green Wave. Considering they used to play at the Superdome, an NFL stadium, I still think they would have been very pleased to move into their own brand new stadium, even if it is much smaller. It's far from being a typical college football stadium design. The very modern look closely resembles some soccer stadiums, like this one in Mexico. The partially covered main stand that holds the press boxes and luxury suites is detached from the rest of the seating, which is also something that's somewhat common in soccer stadiums. But it's looking fantastic, and the sheer amount of green throughout the stadium is quite appropriate given the team's name. Bounce House, home of the UCF Knights. Firstly, props to them for naming the stadium Bounce House. Too many stadiums are called so-and-so stadium, or so-and-so field. It shakes when the crowd jumps around, so you call it the Bounce House. Brilliant. Usually you'd see a stadium like this and assume that it had been around forever, maybe starting out small and growing into what it is today. But no, it was built this century, and I suppose when you take a closer look at the design it's quite clear. The uniformity of it. The exterior in particular. Also, they're not going to call a 100-year-old stadium Bounce House, are they? But what I'm trying to say is they've done a great job replicating the classic college aesthetic, while still including some modern touches. Gerald J. Ford Stadium, home of the SMU Mustangs. It's not named after the former Vice President of the United States. I'm not ashamed to say that I did assume that it was named after him. This Gerald Ford is just your run-of-the-mill billionaire. The stadium is basically halfway between the last two. Not geographically, I meant design-wise. And once again, despite having a very classic look to it with its horseshoe layout and brick exterior, it too is relatively new. I love the grass berm to the south, but it could potentially be turned into a bowl stadium, with a new stand being placed on top of the berm. And I can't help but feel that that would kill the grass. Either way, the spectators will still get that great view of the distant Dallas skyline. TDECU Stadium, home of the Houston Cougars. It's another stadium built this century, but they haven't tried in the slightest to go with a traditional look for this stadium, which is usually the case because the college normally wants the stadium to match the campus. But this campus isn't a particularly old one, so they could do what they like, and thus it's one of the most modern looking college stadiums there is. I do really like the way it looks, the metallic red and silver facade in particular. And it's not just a pretty face, it blocks the wind, sun and sideways rain, but still allows the air to flow. And just like the last one, you get a view of a Texan city skyline, but it's an even better view. Not saying Houston looks better, it's just closer. And just to clarify, I'm not saying it looks worse either. Both good looking cities. Liberty Bowl Memorial Stadium, home of the Memphis Tigers. This one's pretty cool. It's like a more simple and symmetrical version of Autzen Stadium. The exterior is not quite as cutting edge, but it's quite imposing. This section in particular is quite tall. It was named not for its shape, but after the annual game that it hosts, the Liberty Bowl. The fact that it's one of the few proper bowl stadiums is a happy coincidence, I guess. It's the largest stadium in Memphis, as you might have guessed, and it actually hosted an NFL team for one season. No, there wasn't a short-lived Memphis-specific team, it was just the Tennessee Oilers, now Titans, in 1997. It also hosted 3 other pro football teams that lasted just 1 year. So pro teams don't survive here, but the Tigers have been here since '65, aka the beginning. Lincoln Financial Field, home of the Temple Owls. Who'd have thunk it? Eagles can share their nest with owls. I wouldn't have thought that'll work out given that owls are nocturnal and eagles aren't. Anyway, we're getting off topic. If you don't know, it is home to the Philadelphia Eagles of the NFL as well. That's why it looks a bit more expensive than your typical college stadium. With the chairback seats throughout, the interesting looking roof canopies that seem to shade very little seats but look quite sleek nonetheless, and those fancy video boards that are sandwiched between the 2 tiers of seating behind each end zone. It's a great stadium and in high demand. Not only do the Owls play here, but the Army-Navy game is quite often held here, which brings me on to the next stadium. Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium, home of the Navy midshipmen. Yes, the team wears navy blue. If that wasn't the case, I think I would have started a petition. The stadium itself has a fair bit of navy blue as well. The seating layout is nothing that you haven't seen before, except for one aspect. A typical grass berm clearly wasn't enough for them. They have a fancy garden instead, with some seats as well. It's a nice addition to what would otherwise be a fairly standard stadium. Oh, and another nice addition is this jet. They might be stealing the Air Force's thunder with this one. A submarine would have been cool, but I suppose the Navy is responsible for aircraft carriers, so fair enough. And it's done up in the team's colours, bonus points for that. Nippert Stadium, home of the Cincinnati Bearcats. As far as horseshoe stadiums go, this one's got a lot going on. Like many European stadiums, you can tell that it started out as just a regular sports field and then expanded outwards, so there isn't a lot of room to spare, like there is with most college stadiums. Which, combined with the sunken field, gives it this unique look, where the campus buildings are pretty much part of the stadium. Especially this one, that's basically on the concourse. So plenty of people in these buildings get an excellent view of the field. What an office that would be. Since the renovations 5 or 6 years ago, it's become one of my favourites. Purely for its uniqueness and how it blends old school with new school, literally. And the upper deck over on this side looks incredible. Oh, and excuse the soccer field, it was home to Cincinnati's MLS team for a few years. Raymond James Stadium, home of the South Florida Bulls, a second NFL stadium. I'd say it's not quite as impressive as the one in Philadelphia, if it weren't for one thing. If you watch the NFL stadiums video, then you'll know that the most important part of this stadium is the pirate ship. Yes, in this conference there's the Navy and a team called the Pirates, but the one with the ship in their stadium are the Bulls. What a load of bullshit. Of course, it is for the Buccaneers of the NFL, which makes sense, but still. The uniqueness doesn't stop there. I believe it's the only stadium in the conference with a fully natural grass field. I presume that's so the Bulls can graze on it. None of this grain-fed nonsense. H.A. Chapman Stadium, home of the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. It shares the honors of being the smallest stadium in the conference, along with Yulman Stadium. But that's basically all it shares with Yulman Stadium. The design is completely different. It's simple yet elegant. I really like the facades of the 2 main stands. They make me want to play this music. very cathedral-like. You see, that's real music, none of that Dougie McNuggs stuff. The seating behind the south end zone is also somewhat unique, being built into a mound of earth. I do like that, and the stadium as a whole. But I would like to ask, if the part of a regular hurricane that you see is made up of mostly water, then what is a golden hurricane made of? Disturbing. Or maybe it's just the way the sunlight hits the hurricane making it appear golden, who knows. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, have a good one.